The best way for you to protect your inner child is to become the person who you needed when you were going through your trials and tribulations. Welcome or welcome back. It's your favorite mental health specialist, Ty Guidance, and that is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Now, with that being said, because there's no right or wrong way to heal yourself, always and only take what resonates as well as leave the rest. So if it doesn't apply, then that means it's not in a line, which means it is not for you. So don't force it. As well as grab your pens, grab your paper, and be prepared to take notes. For today's video, we're going to go over and discuss why it's so important to protect your inner child, as well as what you could do moving forward as you become the person who you know you're meant to be, as well as some recommendations, some reminders, some disclaimers, and just certain things that you should be aware of. So starting off with the introduction, starting off the first disclaimer, starting off with the topic of today's video. In order for you to heal your inner child, you must become the person who you know you're meant to be. And in order for you to do that, you have to understand that you went through certain things as a child, you went through certain things as a teenager, you went through certain things as an adult, and just because you had certain stages and certain moments of your life, that number one, it is not going to be permanent, and number two, that it is okay. You have to realize this is your first time living in this reality as you. You are not going to have everything figured out. You may not know everything, and that's fine. And the reason why it's fine is because in this life, you're going to grow, you're going to evolve, life is going to change. And until you're able to accept that you had to go through certain chapters, you had to go through certain phases in order for you to identify who you're meant to be, you will continue to hold on to your past. You will continue to allow certain choices that you made that maybe you weren't too proud of, or maybe you didn't have the finances and the resources and the education compared to what you currently know right now, to stay in your mind. And when you hold on to memories and mindsets and behaviors that you're meant to outgrow, you delay yourself. You feel denied. This is where you start to self-sabotage. This is when you become depressed. This is when you start to feel anxious. This is when you start to become overwhelmed. This is when you start to compare yourself. This is when you become bitter. And that's what you don't want. You have to understand that it is unfortunate that you had to go through certain things as a child, and maybe you didn't have the support. Maybe you didn't have the family. Maybe you didn't have the community. You have to understand that in order for you to protect that child, that version of you who needed you, you have to be there for yourself if nobody is there for you. So the second disclaimer is realizing that you did go through certain things. It's so important to identify what you went through and how it made you feel. And the reason why it's so imperative is simply because you are the only person who is going to be there for you at the end of the day. You're the only person who knows how you felt when you went through your seasons of misfortune, when you went through certain chapters where maybe you were dealing with abuse, whether it was emotionally, physically, or financially. You're the only person who knows how you felt when you were being taken advantage of, or maybe you weren't able to express yourself, maybe you were being touched on, maybe you didn't have a roof over your head. You know what it's like to be homeless. You know what it's like to struggle. Nobody could tell you how you're supposed to feel in this life when you've gone through certain things. And you have to understand, as children, if they are not protected, automatically they become cold, they become numb. You don't have to become numb just because you struggled and you suffered in life. So the third disclaimer is allowing yourself to grieve. You have to be able to accept that you were angry. You have to be able to accept the fact that you were in disbelief. You have to be okay with being vulnerable without feeling embarrassed or disappointed or even feeling discouraged. And the reason is simply because at the end of the day, who is anybody to judge you? Everybody has gone through trials and tribulations as a child. Not everybody has a two-parent household or stability or financial resources or even the basic necessities to survive. So you have to understand, if you grew up the way that you did and you know that it was less fortunate or you went without, you are entitled to feel however you want to feel. You are allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel frustrated. You don't have to be ashamed because you grew up homeless, or you grew up poor, or you grew up with narcissistic family members, or you grew up in dysfunction, or you grew up in people were pedophiles or any of those things. It's wicked. It's unfortunate. And until you have people like myself who are adults who've had to learn to protect their inner child, people will continue to make the same choices and continue to pass down the same cycles. And that's what we want to avoid. So the fourth disclaimer as you're learning to protect your inner child is to seek assistance. It's to have that conversation with a therapist. It's to have that conversation with a psychiatrist. It's to have that conversation, for those of you who are into religion and spirituality, with God, the ancestors, the universe. Because I'm letting you know right now, based off of how wicked the world is for certain people, you will become psychotic. You will feel like you are schizophrenic. You will allow all these labels and these attachments that have been projected and deflected onto you become your reality. And when you allow people and places and things who are not you, who have abused you or mistreated you or who have hurt and harmed you, to cloud your judgment, it will distort the image of how you live your life and how you perceive others. Not everybody in this world is a wicked person. Not everybody in the world is suffering. Not everybody in the world is struggling, whether that's financially, emotionally, subconsciously, or consciously, or even financially. Not everybody in the world is a horrible person. There are some people in this world, unfortunately, who suffer, and there's some people who have never. You don't have to compare your journey and what you've gone through, your upbringing, other people, once you realize why you had to go through the things that you went through. And that's the final disclaimer before we get into the recommendations. It's so important that you're able to self-reflect and you're able to isolate yourself and you're able to separate yourself and identify how you felt and why you had to go through certain things as a child. What did it do to help you become the person who you need to be? Or what did it show you that you don't want to continue to do in your future, in your reality? Once I started to self-reflect and identify what happened to me as a child and what I went through as a teenager and even as an early adult, I was able to identify what was for me, what resonated with me, and what wasn't. So therefore, moving forward, I don't continue to make those same choices. And if in the future, if it's meant for me, inshallah, to have children, that number one, I protect them for those things and I educate them, and I continue to educate you watching this as well as myself. I personally am not going to beat myself up about certain things that I've had to learn over time, especially when I may or may not have certain resources like guidance, like family members, like community, like finances. It is not fair to be so hard on yourself about certain things that are out of your control. We as children are programmed to think whatever our parents show us, whatever our caregivers show us, whatever our doctors inform us with, whatever our teachers teach us, whatever our whoever is there for you shows you. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. You have to know that just because you were exposed to certain things as a child doesn't mean that that has to be permanent or that it's for you. And that's going to be the first recommendation. In order for you to protect your inner child, I want you to write down the good memories that you had and why they made you feel good and what you were able to learn from those situations. And I want you to write down the bad memories that you had and how it affected you and what it is that you don't want to continue to do. And it's so important because we as people have nostalgia in many areas of our life when it comes to fashion, when it comes to sports, when it comes to TV shows, when it comes to music, when it comes to entertainment, just in life in general. And it's nothing wrong with cherishing certain, seasons and certain chapters that we had. But when you're holding on to bad memories, when you're holding on to negative experiences, you're unable to move forward. You're unable to see, your purpose and why you had to go through those things. So the second recommendation as you're learning to protect your inner child is to speak up. You as an adult or a teenager or however old you are cannot continue to be mean or to be harsh on yourself. On your list of good and bad memories, you need to be able to speak up and acknowledge and address how certain situations played a part in your life. And just beyond the good and the bad memories, you need to start talking about how certain situations made you feel uncomfortable or how certain situations made you feel excited. In order for you to find joy, if you've never experienced it, you need to be able to acknowledge all of the negative things that happened to you. And you need to identify if it was in your control or if it was something that you were exposed to. So as you're writing down your good and your bad memories and your positive and your negative memories, as well as how certain situations affected you, the second recommendation, once again, is asking yourself and answering this and writing down if this situation was in my control or was it something that I was told? Was it something I had to do? Was it something that I was able to speak up and use your voice on? Because a lot of times as children, we're told what to do by our parents. And you have to realize your parents have parents. So a lot of people, trigger warning, love to be so angry and so frustrated with their parents, not realizing that they were programmed and conditioned to be a certain type of way. So for those of you who have gone through a lot of abuse as a child, it's called a generational cycle. And in order for you to break the generational cycle, you have to be able to identify what you've been taught and what you've been shown. And if it is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, and you know. And if you've been exposed to negative things or wrong situations, you have to be able to forgive yourself, which is going to be the fourth recommendation, which before I get into that, I just want to continue to say, like, you have to be able to forgive yourself, and you have to be able to realize that everybody does something because there is a cause. The effect and the outcome of you struggling and suffering or growing up in poverty is because of how you were raised. And how you were raised is based off of how your parents were raised or whoever raised you. So if you grew up poor as a child and that made you feel angry or that made you become paranoid as an adult or a teenager, you have to realize, okay, did I want to be poor? Did I want to struggle? Did I want to suffer? Or this is all I knew? And it's so important to identify your thoughts based off of what you've been exposed to, because when you're able to see the difference, you're able to make better choices. And that's going to be the final recommendation. But the fourth recommendation is going to be forgiveness. I want you to write a letter to your younger self, your inner child, your past self. And in your letter, I want you to not only apologize to yourself on your notes in the comment section, but I want you to talk to them and let them know what it is that you've learned and what you've gone through, what you've witnessed, good and the bad, and how you're currently feeling right now, and if you are where you want to be in life. And the reason why forgiveness is so important and it's going to take time is simply because when you're a child, once again, and you're being touched on inappropriately, you may not know that that's not appropriate. When you're a child and you're homeless or you're poor, you may not realize that you're homeless and poor until you get around other children or other people. When you come from a narcissistic family and a dysfunctional family and people have gaslighted you and manipulated you, you may not have had the courage or the confidence to defend yourself or separate yourself or express yourself. If you've been around people and they're envious, you may not have been able to articulate yourself or have things without feeling paranoid or without having low self-esteem or whatever it is. You know your situation, but it's so important that we learn to forgive ourselves, because if you're watching this video, which you are, and you're choosing to be here, you've already survived some of the worst days of your life. This doesn't mean that as you grow older in life that you're not going to continue to go through things, but as you learn to protect your inner child, which is yourself, you know what choices hinder you. You know what certain situations block you. You know certain behavior. You start to realize, because in order for you to protect your inner self and your child self, you have to be able to be accountable. You have to be able to be vulnerable. You can't be embarrassed or ashamed about what you went through as a child, because a lot of times it's not in your control. You didn't get to pick a lot of times if you had the luxury who you went to school with or what school you were able to. And if you did, you have to realize how fortunate and how privileged you are. You don't get to pick certain people in your family members who, like I said, who have touched on you inappropriately or who have beaten on you or whatever it was. You are told what you're told. And a lot of times, depending on your generation of parents, you've been told what you had to do without questioning. A lot of times, certain parents who were raised a certain type of way will say, well, that's because I said so. So instead of being angry and bitter at all of the people and the places and things who had an effect on your life, learning to forgive yourself. Because I'm telling you from experience, if those people don't heal their inner child, if your parents or whoever it was doesn't take the time to apologize and work on their mental health, or see God, or see the ancestors, or see the universe, or seek assistance, they're not going to change. They're going to continue to live their life like that. And that is how we have children who grow up to be adults who are murderers, who are rapists, who are serial killers, who are people who hurt and harm themselves. All of the evil and wicked people that you know in this world are children who did not have love, who did not have guidance, who did not have support, and who had adults who failed them. And as your favorite mental health specialist, we're not going to continue that same cycle. Being bitter is not going to help anybody. So you should never be embarrassed. You should never be ashamed. If people make you feel embarrassed and ashamed, you need to stop surrounding yourself with them, and you need to cut them off. Going no contact with the people who hurt and harm you, like I said, if they're not willing to seek therapy or assistance or psychiatrist and get some type of evaluation to better themselves and change their behavior, does not make you a bad person. And I'm speaking from experience. I've witnessed certain things as a child from certain adults, certain people that are quote unquote related, people that I went to schools with, people I work with. I will never talk to those people ever again. And just because you forgive them and you forgive yourself, I'm not bitter. I'm not wrong. I'm not holding a grudge. I'm not childish. You don't get to hurt and harm children and then think when they grow older that they have to speak to you. No, because everyone suffers. And just because you suffered as a child doesn't mean that you have to continue to hurt children or just hurt people in general. Because over here, we protect the children. And that's every child, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, girl, boy. So lastly, when it comes to you protecting your inner child, you need to know it's a process. You're going to go through a fluctuations of emotions. You have to understand, like, when you are talking about trauma that you have been sweeping underneath the rug, you're going to feel some type of way. When you realize what has happened to you and how it made you feel, you may feel triggered. That is fine. Once again, just because you're being triggered and just because you're being challenged to release what no longer serves you doesn't mean it's the end of the world and that you have to continue to live your life like that and that you have to treat people the same way you were treated. Because I'm letting you know right now, all the adults who do that, they never end up becoming the person who they want to be. And if anyone makes you feel less of a person, that's not someone you should want to be around. That's not someone you should want your children around. And if you have children, you need to do that for yourself and to them, because children did not ask to be born. And as an adult, as someone who has gone through certain things in their life, I personally do not condone adults bringing children into this world when, number one, they have not taken the time to work on themselves or to heal themselves, and number two, they're not financially, emotionally, or physically stable. That is selfish. This doesn't mean that people are not allowed to create and procreate in this world, but it's not acceptable. And if you love yourself and you didn't have love, you need to be there for you. And if you have children and you want better for them, that's what you should be doing. And you don't have to be a parent to know what children's wants and needs are. You don't have to be a parent to know how to take care of a child, because guess what? Nobody knows how to take care of a child or be around children, unless you were one. So with that being said, whatever questions, whatever comments, whatever concerns that you have, let me know. Make sure you guys are following me on all my social media platforms. All the information is down in the description box below, as well as booking your service in your session if you're ready. And maybe you need a more intimate vibe and an intimate setting to where you're wanting to work on your inner child, but maybe you have some fear and some doubt. When it comes to your healing journey, there's no right or wrong way. And once again, you don't need to compare your journey or your life to other people, because you're the only person who lived the life that you're currently living right now. It's no need to be envious of people who've had beautiful childhoods. It's no reason to compare yourself to people who do come from love. You're allowed to learn to love yourself if no one gave you that love. And that's why it's so important that you start with yourself. So with that being said, you are loved. I love you. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Peace.